Mama.
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 Da, 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 da.
Mama. Hey. Mama.
Reaching for the fan.
Mama.
Say daddy.
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 Daddy. Mommy. Mom. Dad. Sister.
Say daddy.
Daddy.
Dada.
Dada.
Daddy.
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 Hi, I'm Maddie,
And I'm JC.
and today I'm going to be talking about the early childhood language development, and specifically the effects that the caregiver's responsiveness has on the language development and the behavior development as well. I decided to choose this topic because I do surround myself with kids pretty regularly, and I have noticed that some of them react differently than others. This can be seen in their verbal reactions as well as their behavioral reactions. And hopefully by the end of this video, I'm able to give you a better understanding of the early childhood language development and the caregiver's responsiveness and how that affects the child's development.
I've written down some questions for Maddie. I'm going to ask her and she can respond. So you surround yourself with kids on a pretty regular basis, pretty daily basis. Have you noticed the way different kids interact with you?
I have noticed the way that different kids interact with me.
Okay. What does that have to do with the language development?
Well, behavior and language go hand in hand, or they pretty much go hand in hand. And in some cases, the children will react strictly based off of physical body language as their behavior. And sometimes the kids will react on more verbal language usage, where they ask for things versus taking things, or they tell you they need things versus gesturing with their hands.
Right.
And I've actually gathered some research that will back this up and prove that there's actually some in-home responsiveness that goes along with
Okay.
this idea.
So why did you choose this focus or the behavioral effect on language development?
I chose this because, like I've said before, I do surround myself with children pretty regularly, and some of the kids will react differently around me. Some of them, like family members, will be way more talkative. They'll come up and give you a hug immediately, whereas other kids, they do tend to be a little bit more shy and they don't talk as much.
Okay. Do you think this also plays into their interaction with other children, not just yourself?
Oh, for sure, it definitely does, because I've seen where within sibling interaction as well, that the children react differently when it's brother and sister versus mom and dad.
Right.
Whereas an individual child, where it's just them at home with the parents, they have a little bit more attention from the parents, and so they get a little bit more of what they want.
I also know what they can get away with and who
That's
they can
true.
get away with what.
That's true.
So I think we all had that teacher in school that we knew we could get away with a lot more than other teachers.
Mhm.
So the next question, what sort of environmental factors have you specifically looked at?
Well, when I first started my research, I really wasn't thinking of anything specific.
Right.
Clearly, I've been taking a language acquisition class, so I've been exposed to different theories already. So I was already kind of thinking that the maternal instinct and the maternal relationship with the parent will have a huge factor in the relationship with language and behavior. But as I looked more deeply into it, there's actually a lot more factors than just the mother that takes place.
Right, for sure. I feel like it's a lot to do with everyone they encounter, really. I mean, they take something from not just their mom or dad, but everyone they encounter.
For sure.
So for my next question, let's think about the mom or in-home caregiver, their interactions and how they influence, their child first. What are the specific factors that influence the child's language development at home?
Well, clearly, as we've already established, the mother is incredibly important with the child's development. And if you think about it, so is everybody else that's involved, whether that's like a grandparent that watches them throughout the day, or dad if he's not working,
Right.
whatever the case may be. And so when we're saying watching the kids during the day, I'm thinking the age is more so birth until about preschool. Because once they're in preschool, they're at school most of the day.
Right.
They're not really at home as often, and they're getting more interaction at school.
Right.
But that in-home interaction is actually very, very important.
Oh, for sure. I think that is the building blocks of, who they are around other people and around other kids and other adults as well.
Mm-hmm. And there's actually a lot of factors that do play into it as well, such as the family poverty and education, as well as the family's emotional well-being.
Right.
And the different research that I have done has actually proven this in different ways, whether it is through different surveys or other research.
Right. So you kind of mentioned this earlier, but how exactly do these factors of poverty, education, and emotional well-being influence the language development of a child? Like, how does that all work?
I actually found a study done by Kimberly Sharkin and some of her colleagues where they actually discovered and investigated these effects of poverty, income, and emotions, basically. They called it specifically the depression of the mother, because when you think of poverty, you don't think just poor people. That's not what that word means. It's the same thing with depression.
Right.
It doesn't just mean that you're sad all the time. So these three different factors have a huge influence on the child's language development, because if you think about it, poverty, depending on how much money they have, can actually influence the education level that you're able to pay for.
Right.
So if a child's parents are not as well off, they don't have as high of an education, they might not be able to help their child out as much, and they might not know to conversate with them as much or to talk to them in ways that mother-child interaction normally is. The parent-child connection, as Ann Larson actually discusses in her article, is actually very vital and important, because without that parent and child connection, the parent isn't able to differentiate between the different social interactions and help the child understand what is what.
Right.
So the pre-linguistic behavior per se is actually pretty key.
Okay. So what exactly is pre-linguistic behavior?
Have you ever seen a mom and a baby?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen how the baby might coo or react in a certain way to something different?
Right.
Well, the mom's reaction to that is that pre-linguistic behavior. So the child is making these connections, they're showing excitement, they're showing that they're upset, and when the mom reacts, that's acting on that pre-linguistic behavior that the child is.
So it's kind of like a two-way street, really.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
So
gotcha.
without the child's reaction, the mother can react.
Right. That makes sense. So you mentioned education levels of the parent and the caregivers early on. Being that they play a very, very important role in a child's life. Why is this so important though? Like what are the building blocks there?
Well, if you think about it, language is hard.
Right.
I mean, English is one of the most complex and complicated languages in the whole world.
Supposedly the hardest.
Right. And we are, as English speakers right now, we're combining different letters and phrases to create words and sentences. We aren't even really having to think about it that much, we're just producing it.
Right.
But when you're teaching a child how to read or write or even talk, sometimes that pronunciation is actually a little bit more difficult, because different combinations of letters can be pronounced different ways, depending on the word that it is or the meaning of the word. We actually watched a video in class where there's a community of different people in a different country. Can't remember exactly what it was, but there was one word that meant like 8 different things. The way it was pronounced is the differentiation of the meaning. So,
but it's spelled the same?
yes.
Huh.
So the pronunciation is actually very important. And Donald Compton actually had a research study done with some colleagues that showed the complexity of the pronunciation.
Right.
He specifically focused on children that were borderline dyslexia or had the dyslexia disability. But with or without the dyslexia, pronunciation can be hard. If you think about it, the phonics of it. The PH sound can sound different depending on the word, and the vowels can sound different depending on the word. I'm sure everybody has seen the meme where there's one word that has the E sounding like 8 different ways.
Right.
Right. So the vowels can change the pronunciation as well as the meaning. And trying to teach a kid how to say these words, education is important. So if the mom or dad or whoever's taking care of the child isn't as educated, how are they going to be able to truly help
Right.
the child?
That's true. And then once you start writing as well, like you mentioned early on, it's, you know, you have there, and there. You've got your and your. So
It's all pronounced the same way, but it's spelled completely differently.
exactly. So eventually, you know, the child is going to grow up and enter preschool or daycare, and go a little bit beyond just his home life and be exposed to other people outside of his home. But how is that not necessarily a factor of the behavioral development?
Well, in a sense it is, but it's not as big of a factor as the in-home environment. Larson and her crew actually discussed this in their research that they did, where they compared at-home care given by the parent's child or caregiver versus the in-school or in daycare care given to the child.
Okay.
So you have at home where, especially for a firstborn child, it's basically 1-to-1, or one child to 2 parents,
Right,
something
right.
like that. Even with other children at home, it's still a smaller ratio versus at school, where you have
Yeah.
15 to 20 kids with 1 or 2 teachers.
Right.
At school, the child's not getting as much reaction or interaction with an adult. Yes, they can have the interaction between themselves as children, but while that's beneficial, it's not as beneficial as that adult affirmation. So the adult affirmation of saying, yes, you did a good job, or no, let's not do that.
Right.
That is a lot more beneficial with them learning, oh, I can do this, oh, I can't do this, this is what this means, this is what this means, this is what this does not mean.
Right.
Whereas another child will just be able to react to it.
That makes sense. So how are language development and behavior ultimately related? Like, can you elaborate on that some?
Sure. So, Larson and Lestari, Gennady and Lestari, actually, they both looked at this in different ways. At home, you obviously get more interaction. At home, you have more option for discussion. At home, you have more adult conversation.
Right.
Whereas at school or in a preschool or daycare setting, the teacher is more apt to talk to the children as if they are babies. Yes, that baby talk is vital, but not as they get older.
Right.
And talking to the children as if they are children is not necessarily going to be as helpful as talking to them and answering their questions as if they're adults. Children have a voice, and they just need that encouragement to use their voice. Once they have that encouragement, they do gain more of an independence and more of the chance to self-regulate their own behavior, because they can process what is correct versus what's incorrect and the different reactions that they get from the different people.
Right. That goes back to what I said earlier. You know who you can, do certain things with.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a little cousin of my own that when he's around me, he never baby talks at all. Like, he either is really, really quiet or he actually says words. But when he's with other people, like my little sister or whatever, he'll baby talk all the time. And it's because she plays into it. But I tell him not to baby talk. So.
Right.
But,
And it's seen with infants too, in that mimicking and that where the parent does the same thing that the child's doing.
right. That's it. Appreciate y'all watching this video.
Thank you.